I'll be very quick. I know we just have 10 minutes, so I'll quickly go through the slides, but we can flip back to any of them if there are any questions. So, hello, my name is Johanne. I'm the Research Program Director for the Canadian Research Data Center Network. I won't read this entire land acknowledgement, but I just want to recognize in Canada, otherwise known as part of Turtle Island, North America, we are on the traditional territories of different First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. And so because the network is across the country, we also have the link of dataland.ca at the bottom, which actually is international too. So if you're curious to go take a look about the traditional territories where you are, there may be information there as well. So at CRDCN, we're one of 19 of Canada's major science initiatives funded by the Canada Foundation for Innovation. There are 2,500 researchers across the country, across disciplines. We have secure data facilities at 33 collaborating institutions, which are all universities. There's over 300 data sets that have secure sensitive microdata that is housed by Statistics Canada, which is the national statistical agency. And since we started tracking publications about 20 plus years ago, there are about 6,000 publications, articles, and policy reports that have been produced using those data sets, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. I won't read all of this either, but it's really, our vision is to be recognized nationally, internationally for the work that we do that leverages the microdata. And then the mission is to facilitate the access, to help foster a professional community, and to contribute to evidence-informed policy using the data. We just are in the process of publishing our new strategic plan. It's currently with the designers, I believe, and translation, but these are the 4 strategic pillars in our strategic plan for 2024 to 2029, and I'll talk a little bit more about them on the slides that follow. So in terms of data, it's really about enabling access to the data. So just for context, these universities and the researchers and students at the universities can access the data without paying a fee through CRDCN if their university is a collaborating institution. If they were to go outside of CRDCN and go straight to StatCan, they would have to pay $13,500 for each project using a data set. So one of our main pillars is to enable access. So the funding that we get and the contributions of the collaborating universities basically cover those fees for all of those projects, so that that cost is not a barrier for researchers wanting to use the data. And of the 2,500 researchers across the country, every year there's usually about 25, in recent years anyway, about 2,500 researchers that have a project each year. About a third of those are students. So cost as a barrier to access is particularly important for everyone, but especially if we're looking at the master's and PhD students that are doing the work. Very few undergrads access the data just because they're not usually at that level of skill yet. They need advanced statistical analysis skills to develop that, which usually comes after their undergrad. These are the main subject areas of the StatCan microdata subject. So the data that are in there, some are gathered by StatCan, but some are also gathered through agreements that StatCan will have with the provinces. So for example, in Canada, education is a provincial jurisdiction. So if they want the education data in there, then they need to make an agreement between the federal government and a provincial government to do that. And so we have that in place for BC, for example. So a lot of work is done in BC where you can follow anonymized, but you can follow actually people from kindergarten, all the way to the end of post-secondary, link to their tax and employment records and do all kinds of things. But these are the subject areas. So it's not just what the federal government collects, but there's other data through different kinds of agreements. These are some of the examples of the data set. So these are the names, and this is just, there's more than 300. So this is just a snapshot, giving you a sense of what some of them are called. They run on different frequencies. The census is every 4 years. Other things happen once a year. Obviously, the COVID-19 survey data was during COVID, not only about vaccinations. CRB is was the government subsidy across the country to individuals and businesses that were impacted because they were unable to work during CRB. So the second strategic pillar is community and capabilities. So it's really providing, trying to provide professional development, understanding the evolving needs, trying to bring the members, the researchers together to events as you know, for networking and exchange and supporting collaboration. So we do about I should mention the central staff. There's 13 of us on the central staff, and the research portfolio, there's myself and I have 2 direct reports. So it's quite a lean team for a nationwide organization. So in the research portfolio, we usually deliver about 12 training offerings per year, which may not seem like a lot, but for the 3 of us, and given that that's not the only thing we do, that's like we're kind of maxed out at 12. But so it's really important to us that we target the skills that are needed, because we don't have unlimited resources to provide training. And about half of the training that we provide is on particular data sets, because the researchers have indicated that that's the top priority for training that we provide. So there's a new there's a training plan that went from our first formal training plan from 2021 to 2024 was aligned with our strategic plan. Similarly, our knowledge mobilization plan. Both of these I have been working on updating them for 2024 to 2029 to align with the new strat plan. So those will probably go to our board for approval, I think, at the November meeting this year. The third pillar is really to try to connect researchers and decision makers so that the work that the researchers are doing with the data can be used to inform policy. So we have a number of research policy nexus events. There's always, at our annual conference, there's always some of the programming is about bringing academic researchers and policymakers together. And then in the research portfolio, myself and my 2 colleagues in that portfolio, we have ongoing outreach efforts to primarily federal government, but we're actually submitting a funding proposal for an outreach campaign to provincial government that would run over the course of next year. So cross your fingers for us on that one. One of the things that we do every year is we do an annual survey of the researchers. A lot of the responses that we get from them is required for our reporting to our funders. So we have some standard things, like the funders, of course, want to know how many publications, what universities are the researchers from, what disciplines are they in, what policy reports do they do, what data sets do they use, you know, those kinds of things. But while we have the researchers once a year to collect that information, we've sprinkled a few questions across that survey for our purposes. And so one of the things that we started asking them a few years ago is, you know, in the work that you published in the last year, or presentations that you gave in the last year, what policy areas do you think, you know, that it has most relevance? And so this information is helpful to us when in our outreach to government, so that we can say, you know, this is what the researchers identify as where their work is most relevant. Also, so the research collaboration that we do, as I said, there's constant outreach that we have. And so last year, for example, the best case scenario for our outreach is, I mean, there's everything from putting together those events that bring policymakers and researchers together, but at the opposite end of the spectrum is if we can actually arrange a memorandum of understanding with a government department who will invest resources in having research done. And so this was the case with the Department of Justice Canada last year, who contributed some resources identified some policy areas that were a priority for them. CRDCN then handles a call for proposals, double-blind adjudication. Justice Canada has representation on the adjudication committee. We have a standard rubric for scoring, all of that. And then these are the projects that were funded last year. So this is really a best case scenario for us, because the researchers will do work that they'll produce a report for Justice Canada, but all of the work that they've done can be repurposed as well to submit to a journal for peer-reviewed publication. So this is always what we're going for, but this is a long game. This usually takes, it usually takes 6 months to negotiate the MOU. Then we have to launch the call for proposals, give people time to submit, adjudication, and then when it comes to the data themselves, the researchers, because it's such sensitive data, there's a strict vetting process that they have to submit a proposal to StatCan, indicating that the research question that they are trying to ask can only be answered with this microdata, that the question cannot be answered with less sensitive data. And so inside StatCan, then there's a lot of vetting that's done to make sure that de-identification of people is not possible, and that sort of thing. So this is a long game, but the ROI for everyone is really worth it. So the end of the day, from start to finish, this is 2 years, from the conversation to negotiation to the call to the research to it's 2 years. The fourth pillar is our research ecosystem. So being involved with international organizations, going to international events, trying to learn from each other. So, the previous conversation and all of these meetings are really helpful in that capacity, trying to contribute to conversations as well. Excuse me. And then the last bullet about public trust is something that we really, we talked about we took about a year of stakeholder engagement in making the new strategic plan, and just looking at the current climate for trust or distrust in science and misinformation and that sort of thing, just really looking at the role that we play to try to contribute to public trust and research practices as part of the research ecosystem strategic pillar as well. These are some of the examples of where we're involved in the ecosystem. So some of these I'm involved with. Some of you will know the person I report to, our executive director, is Natalie Harrower, and so some of you will know her. And she's the one that brought actually CRDCN to become a member of RDA. And then that's it.
I was wondering how much the policymakers. Excuse me, because I'm a little bit sick. How much the policymakers consult you? How do you feel that your initiative is taken by policymakers?
Yeah, no,
sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, no, it's really challenging. And I mean, we've heard from the part of the reason why we have ongoing conversations with a number of federal government departments in particular is because we've heard anecdotally from them that they regularly consult. On our website, we have a bibliography part with the researcher survey. We ask about publications, presentations. So our website contains a bibliography of all of the information that we have about research that's been published using CRDCN data. So, and we've heard from policymakers that they consult our bibliography regularly, but that's invisible to us. And so I've been very direct with them and saying, so we've talked about, we make research policy snapshots that now have a permanent identifier. We have these ongoing meetings, that we bring them together. But I've been really, especially the ones where we have long-standing relationships, I've said to them, it's really important for our funders are asking us for evidence of impact on policy. And unless there is a citation, or unless, how can is there an easy way for us to get that? And so not that I've abandoned ship on that. I mean, like I said, we have the research policy snapshots with the permanent identifiers, but really it's unless there's a citation or, one of the nice things about these, the MOUs, is that one of the things we started doing is we can say, okay, when we negotiate these MOUs, the policy people will say, these are our priorities. And
Yeah.
then we will say, okay, based on these priorities, this is what the data sets have. So, you know, if your question is X, maybe we can't quite answer X, but we could answer, you know, X plus one sort of thing, right? So that helps shape.
Yes.
And then when the research, you saw the names of the Justice Canada projects, we can say these projects directly address the needs that the policymakers asked for. And then what we've started to do just in the past couple of years is because then they'll say, oh, but did it impact policy, an actual policy? And so we can't say that, but what we started doing is looking at those projects and based on the reports, identifying the populations that were studied. And so I don't have a Justice Canada one, but a couple of years ago, we did one with Women and Gender Equality Canada. And one of the populations studied was men who take paternity leave in Canada. And so we're not able to say that we changed all fathers' lives, but we are able to say the number of men who took a paternity leave in Canada during this year is this number of men. So there's a potential for the work, and that was a similar situation where Wage identified the policy areas, right? So we're able to say there's a potential that this work can help inform policy that serves this population of this many people. So it's not, you know, it's kind of the best that we can do, but yeah, it is really challenging, that piece for sure.